Hey guys, Tim with Little Crow Gunworks. Welcome back to the channel. Well, it's finally time to get into the actual load development testing portion of this series. Our barrel break-in is complete, and we got our 80 rounds down the barrel, did a thorough cleaning, and then another 20 to kind of refoul the barrel. Out at the farm, having some fun, banging some steel, and now we're ready to start our actual load development testing and get good data. First, I guess I want to talk about that break-in a little bit. How about that frickin' rifle and reloader 15 load? And that shot incredible. No load development whatsoever. I'm hoping that video inspired you guys. You know, this is part of what I'm trying to accomplish with this series, is to be a mentor or a teacher, instructor for you guys. Which I did not have. And I spent a lot of time screwing around, way too much time, screwing around at 100 yards, trying to make my rifles shoot all the bullets in the same hole, when I could have made better use of that time. I've been out practicing at long range and learning how to read wind, which is infinitely more important than your exact group size at 100 yards. And I don't know when I want to get into this. Maybe now is a good time, maybe not. About what helped me kind of turn the corner, but I guess what's at the bottom of it is that you can do amazing things with even a mediocre load. And once you know what you're doing and you know how to shoot long range and your fundamentals are solid and you know how to use your ballistic solver and get a good zero and like all your inputs are good from a out in the field shooting standpoint, it's truly amazing what you can do. You can hit targets with a very mediocre load. So I'm hoping that barrel break-in inspired you guys to get out and shoot, lowered the intimidation factor, and showed you that, you know, don't waste every second you have and all your resources and everything at short range, because it's not that important. You can still do incredible things with just a mediocre load. I'm not feeling that hot, so I'm going to do the best I can to stay on track here, and I guess for better or worse, the days that I'm not feeling that well, my TACT, T-A-C-T, has a tendency to go out the frickin' window, and the videos get a little more Western, and some of you guys really like that. Some of you get your feelings hurt, but I think for the most part, most of you really like that, because those videos are, I don't want to say the most honest, but they're the most direct. And I think for most of us grown men, that's the most helpful. I say men because 95% of our viewers, maybe 97%, are men. And most of you guys are older than me. But, all right. So now the barrel's broke in. What do we do? Where do we go? Well, I hope by now, by the time you have the barrel broke in, you've decided on your brass. You have enough brass for the life of the barrel, whatever you decided to pick. You picked your primer. Hopefully you have enough of those for the life of the barrel, unless you're one of those guys that likes to switch primers after your load development's done in the hopes that the new primer is going to shoot better than whatever you developed the load on. You can do that. I don't think it's a good idea. I really don't think the primer, for 99% of you, I don't think the primer makes any difference at all. Depending on the circumstances, like if you're shooting small rifle primers, some of them have thicker cups than others and can tolerate more pressure than others. But for the most part, I don't think the primer is going to make or break the load on whether or not it can shoot small. I don't think it really matters. This isn't about that, but hopefully you have your brass picked and you got enough of it, your primer picked, your bullet picked, the best bullet for the job, whatever job you're trying to accomplish. And now we're down to, okay, we have all that figured out. How do we pick a powder? You know, I showed you on Gordon's how to select good contenders, but how do we, how do we find a winner? What do we do? And I mentioned that you can dabble in each one a little bit. So we picked our bullet, that's our bullet. We're not going to take the coward's way out and switch to bullet because, whatever. This is the bullet. Now we're going to dabble in different powders to pick a winner. Well, how do we do that? Well, I guess maybe I'll start by showing you how I calibrated GRT based on, we selected IMR 4895, and I can show you, okay, we tested this one charge weight, shot really good, shot a 5-shot group that was in the 0.4s. A lot of guys would be done there at that point, and and that'd be their finished load. But maybe we'll go into Gordon's here and show, okay, here's the average velocity we got with that charge weight. And then we have good inputs, we have everything, we know the temperature it was that day when we tested. We can go in here and calibrate GRT so that it matches reality, so that way we can figure out a viable ladder. And there's a lot of different ways to do ladder tests. Oh boy, I guess maybe this is a good time to say this. There are ladder tests have been done to death, and a ladder test is simply a buzzword for an incremental powder charge test, where you're testing ever increasing powder charges until you hit max pressure or wherever you decide to stop. So ladder test is a generic buzzword term. And those types of tests have been done to death. If you guys have been around watching on YouTube, you know that they've been done to death, and there's a whole bunch of different methods for how to try to find the best load using a ladder test, and how to find the best load, and on and on. Brace for impact. I have good news and bad news. The good news is I'm going to show you guys how to do this and how to find the best load for the combination that you picked. Your brass, your this, that, whatever. So the good news is I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. Chapter and verse. The bad news is most of you are going to have to forget everything you've learned about it up until this point in time, because it's misleading, it's wrong, it's incomplete, it's partially truthful, partially useless, partially harmful. I have not seen anybody online test and do things the way that I do. And all I've seen are like little slivers of information that have been released by the very top guys. That was enough information for me with my level of knowledge to know they test exactly the way I do. And they're little teeny, like you have to be on the ball, you can't miss it, you can't miss exactly what they say, and you have to know the context in which they're saying it to be able to pick this up. So, but most of the videos out there, so most of what you might have learned online about ladder testing has nothing to do with what I do or what I look for or how I test or why I test. So you've been warned. This is going to be like eye-opening and staggering for most of you. So I think let's start by calibrating GRT based on that one group we shot with IMR 4895. And then we'll talk about increment size for your ladder test and what I think you guys should do to dabble with each of the powders, however many you decide to test, what you should do to dabble in those to try to pick a winner. So I think we'll get our screen recording fired up here. 3, 2, 1, and we're live. Let's see, we're almost 10 minutes in already. All right, so we have Gordon's pulled up here. We have our inputs are all the same on the left side as where they were before. We have our Sierra Match King in here at the default initial pressure that has not been doctored, and IMR 4895, same thing. None of these inputs have been doctored, and we just have our powder charge input of 43.36 grains, which is the charge weight that I tested that I mentioned was close to the optimal barrel time. So what Gordon's predicted for a velocity was 2711. And my actual that day, when I tested it, was 70 degrees in mid-October, if you can believe that. Minnesota. It was a gorgeous day. Gordon's predicted 2711. My actual average velocity was 2769. So we have to go from 2711 all the way up to 2769. Now, I should say that I've been playing with, I mentioned in previous videos that I kind of been playing with how to calibrate GRT, how to calibrate this velocity and what the best way to do it is. And I'm getting some input and feedback from some of you guys in the comments. Some guys are saying, okay, well, you go into the OBT and you change your velocity here from 2711 to 2769, and you hit compute OBT charge, and it will give you, all right, the adjusted pressure and velocity. And in order to do that, the system, well, let me make this bigger. So, all right, I always have to remember that some of you guys are watching this on a cell phone, and you can't see it unless I make it bigger. Okay, so by doing that, by inputting your actual velocity and hitting compute, what it does is, as I understand it, what the system will do is it will change this isentropic exponent and the combustion coefficient. It'll, I guess, auto-simulate and play with those numbers until it comes up with what it thinks those values are in order to create that velocity with that charge weight. And then you can write down these two numbers, the exponent and the coefficient. You can write those down and then input them over here, and that's one way to true it. And then, so I played with that for this rifle, and the results I ended up getting in the ladder test that we'll go into, the full ladder test that we'll go into next video. I looked at all the data and the velocities that I got, and I did it that way. I trued it that way and looked at how GRT was versus reality. And then I tried just modifying, then I re-zeroed the whole system, and then I tried modifying this isentropic exponent, just that, until they lined up. And then I looked at all the charge weights and all the velocities, and then I re-zeroed it again, tried changing the combustion coefficient, which I mentioned in the powder videos, and saw how that lined up. And then I went back to how I started, which was messing with the initial pressure to get it to line up. And of those four methods, for this gun and this series with this powder and this bullet and this, the way I was doing it, messing with the bullet initial pressure made everything line up the best. Of all those four ways to true it, messing with the initial pressure and bringing that up so that reality matched GRT across all different charge weights, that lined it up the best. If I just changed that initial pressure one time, most of the charge weights and velocities lined up the closest. Any of the other methods I tried for truing were less accurate. Does that mean it's always the right way to do it? I don't know. I don't care. I'm just telling you guys that I'm trying all the different ways that you guys are recommending, and the initial pressure is still the most accurate. Not only in this gun for me, I've tried it with other ones, and it seems to be the most accurate way to calibrate it, but I don't know. You guys can do it however you want. Don't get lost in the weeds. I don't think it matters. But that said, I am going to mess with this initial pressure until I get it to line up. So we're looking for 2769. There we go. 6350. So if we raise that initial pressure to 6350, we get a pressure of, oh, I didn't mean to do that, 61,670, and the velocity is 2769. at 70 degrees, which was the temperature the day I tested. And I was in the shade, and so was the ammo, so it was at ambient air temperature. And I gave it time to acclimate and all that. So now that we trued that, we go, okay, now we want to come up with a way to dabble in these different powders. So what I suggest is going out, and whether you shoot, so let's say you want to test 5 powders or 3 or whatever the number is. I suggest loading a few different charge weights like I showed and go out and shoot them, so that way you can calibrate each powder. Once you have each powder calibrated, then you can come back in here and go, okay, now that I have it calibrated, I want to shoot, whether it's a 10-shot test or a 15-shot test or whatever. A lot of you guys that are watching this watched the 7mm Showdown series, and you became familiar with my 10-shot test, my 10-shot ladder test. I'm calling it my test because when I started doing it years ago, I had never heard of or seen anybody else doing it. I think a couple people have mentioned in the comments there's somebody else that does that style test. His name escapes me. I don't know, but at any rate, I'm not copying anybody. This is something that I started doing because I noticed a trend in all my ladder tests, and I thought, okay, well, I can get pretty low resolution but fairly accurate information by just doing one shot of each charge weight. And I know your groups aren't big enough. Police are going to come after me. I don't care. You guys, I'll give the devil his due eventually here. But so once you have the powder trued, what I recommend doing is going, okay, now it's trued. We want to test, like I said in the powder video, we want to start at around 50,000 PSI up to whatever you decide your max to be. 62, 65, whatever you decide you want it to be. I mentioned before, if you have a modern gun, modern components, 65 is probably a safe max. If you go much over that, generally the gun's going to shoot like shit. For this series, I wanted it to be 62, so that's where I stopped. And I said, okay, I'm going to test from 50 to 62. Now, for you guys, I didn't do it in this series because I wanted to use IMR 4895, and I was dead set on that. For you guys that are trying to explore and figure out, like, what powder should I pick, how do I dabble in it, here's what I recommend doing. I recommend you do my 10-shot test. Now, whether you end up doing 10 shots or 12 shots or 15 shots or whatever, I think it's going to depend on the cartridge size and what powder you're using and that sort of thing. But the principle is the same. So why are we doing a 10-shot test, and what is it? So my 10-shot test is basically a way for you to explore, and whether it's 10 or 12 or 15, it doesn't matter, but it's a way for you to explore a powder and figure out, like, is my gun happy with this combination in general? You know, and one thing I should say is that a lot of my reloading methods are just that, because, you know, a lot of what Hornady says about sample sizes and group sizes, and you need to have large numbers for your samples to be statistically relevant. I agree with that. However, you can get a lot of good information just looking for trends. So I'm not really looking for definitive anything. With anything I test, I'm not looking for definitive anything. I'm looking for trends. Like, what is this thing trying to tell me? And where do I generally want to be? And that's the best way to look at it. You shouldn't be looking for definitive anything, because there isn't anything definitive. In order to find a definitive anything in load development, you're going to have to shoot the barrel out before you find it. So because that's not realistic, we have to look for trends. Now, if you're shooting my 10, 12, 15 shot test, whatever it ends up being, what you're going to do is, once you have your powder calibrated, you're going to load one round at whatever GRT predicts will be 50,000 PSI on the day and at the temperature that it's going to be that day. So you load one round at 50,000 PSI, and then you want to load one round in increments slowly going up until you hit your max. What size should the increments be? Oh boy. So this is something that I think is derailing a lot of you and keeping most of you from finding a stable load that's reliable across time and across temperature and across whatever. If you guys really want to find the best load and you want it to be consistent, most of you have to start loosening the purse strings and testing way more than you are. I think there's too many people that buy a box of, if you're a hunter, you buy a box of 50. A lot of hunting bullets come in boxes of 50, not boxes of 100. Well, a lot of you buy that box of 50 bullets and you're expecting to find the best load by the end of that box of 50. You're completely out to lunch. You can find a good load with my 10-shot method, but the odds that you're going to find the best one in a box of 50 bullets is virtually zero. So in order to find the best load for the combination of components you're using, you guys got to test way more than you are. And I'm going to say 95% of you need to be using smaller increments than what you are. What size increment should you use? What I suggest doing is, once you have your powder calibrated, figure out what your max charge weight is going to be, relatively on the day that you're testing. So if you're going to go out and do a ladder test and it's going to be 44 degrees, as it was in my case, you go, all right, what charge weight is going to get me up to my max pressure of, say, 62,000 PSI? And you go, all right, it looks like it's going to be 43.6 or thereabouts. What I suggest is, once you figure out what your approximate max charge weight is going to be, you use that number to figure out your increment size. So in this case, if our max charge was 43.6 grains, you take that number and you multiply it times 0.0045, and you'll get a number. And then you start over and say, okay, take your max charge times 0.006. So from 0.0045 to 0.006. As an example, we'll do it with our 43.6 grains here, times 0.0045 gives us 0.1962. And then 43.6 times 0.006 gives us 0.2616. So we have a range of 0.1962 to 0.2616. That should be your increment size, somewhere in there, whatever's convenient for you. So in this instance, because it was 0.1962 to 0.2616, I wanted as high a resolution information as I could get. The smaller the increments you test, the higher the resolution of the information. So I went with 0.2 grain increments for a 308 size case. I'm sure a lot of you test bigger than that. I think you're wasting your time. You need to be testing in smaller increments. I know that means you're going to burn more components. Trust me, it's worth it. The resolution of the information you get is much better than if you're testing giant increments. So whatever your max is going to be, whatever cartridge you have, I suggest taking that max charge weight and multiply it times 0.0045, and then again times 0.006 to get a range, and then pick an increment in between that range that makes sense and works for you. I know a lot of guys personally and online that test way bigger increments than that, like on the order of 0.009 to 0.01 to 0.012. Like huge. If you use that formula that I gave you to figure out your increments on a 223 size case, you better be testing every 10th. So 23.0, 23.1, 23.2, 23.3, and so on, so on, so on, so on. I know guys personally that test in 0.3 to 0.4 grain increments on a 223. You're jumping over that. Those are gigantic steps. You're jumping over likely the best loads. So hard truth number one, you need to drastically shrink your increment size if you really want to find the best load. If you don't, stay with the increment size that you're using. If you really want to find the best one, use the formula I gave you. So now that we know what our increment size is, in this case for 308, it's going to be 0.2 grain increments. We go, okay, what charge weight gives us 50,000 PSI? I think we'll come down here. I think it was around 40.8 or something like that. Yeah, 50,642. So I think that was the lowest charge weight that I tested. And then you go, all right, we're going to test every 0.2 grain increment, just one shot of each. So we load one round at 40.8, one round at 41 grains, one round at 41.2, 41.4, 41.6, and so on and so on, until we get up to our max, which I think was 43.6. That was the highest I tested. So whatever that is, that's going to be 10, let's see, 41.8, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So in my case, that 10 shot test was really going to be 15 shots. So we load one round of each for a total of 15 shots, spanning the whole band of our pressure range. And you do that for each powder you want to test. So if you're going to test 5 powders, you got to do that 5 times. So you got 15 rounds times 5 powders, whatever that is, 75 shots, just to find a powder. And you don't need to clean in between. Just go out and shoot them. If you can, go out and shoot them all on the same day. I know that's a lot of shooting, but in order for it to be fair, you should test them all on the same day and under the same conditions and circumstances, and you should also test them round robin. So once you have all those loaded, then what you want to do is pick your day to test, make sure you have tons of time, and then go to the range, get set up. And you want to have, when you're testing, you want to have a large enough area to capture all the shots with a fine point of aim, like I've mentioned. So say a big sheet of cardboard, if you can test 5 different powders, you should have 5 different dots on the cardboard, well spread out, so none of the shots are going to, from one powder is going to overlap with the other. And then what you want to do is you want to shoot all your given charge weights for, say, powder A, whatever your first powder is. You want to shoot all those charge weights at one bullseye. And you want to have a camera, if at all possible. You want to have a camera on the target, downrange, off to the side, pointed at the target, so you can record this whole process. And you can go back and mark, okay, where each shot was. And you're looking for a couple different things when you do this. So you have your 5 points of aim for your 5 different powders. And then when you test, depending on the kind of rifle you have and how fast it heats up, it's really hard for me to give a recommendation on how long to let it cool between shots. I guess the best advice I can give you is get a chamber chiller. There's a few different companies that make devices for cooling off your barrel by blowing air down the barrel. The one I like to use is Chamber Chiller. That's the name of the company. And they have one that plugs into these portable battery packs. Uses a USB to plug into these portable battery packs, so you have hours and hours and hours of use before the battery goes dead. I recommend using those. And what I do is I'll take a shot, say of powder A, put the chamber chiller in for a minute and a half or something like that. Depending on the ambient air temperature, it's going to fluctuate a lot. But basically, you don't really ever want the barrel to get to the point where you can't hold your hand on it, right above the chamber. If you can't hold your hand on it, it's too hot. So it can be warm, but not so much that you can't leave your hand parked there. So I'll take my first shot of powder A. So my lowest charge weight of powder A, I'll shoot that at the first bullseye. Then powder B, I'll take the first shot. Powder C, take the lowest charge weight shot of that one. D and E, and so on. So I'll shoot one of each, the lowest charge weight, then the second charge weight. I'll start with E and go back up. And then I'll shoot, I just snake back and forth, shoot round robin like that. So that way, all of the conditions of the day are evenly spread out across the test. There isn't any one powder that's being treated favorably towards the other. Like generally, if you shoot 75 rounds of whatever cartridge in one session, there's going to be some fatigue, some shooter fatigue that sets in. Well, you're evenly spreading that across the test, and the heat soak in the gun, and the fouling in the barrel, and the wind conditions, and the weather conditions, and the mirage, and the lighting, and. You're all the variables that contribute to what the hell happens downrange is evenly being distributed across the test. That's why I test round robin virtually always, because there's some diehards that will say, well, if you're testing different powders, you need to clean the barrel in between, or that's going to cause it to be erratic, and that's going to cause this and that, and there might be unburnt powder residue from the previous powder that's skewing the results of for the night. You guys just save it. If it's that sensitive, I'm not interested. Like if the combination is that sensitive to powder residue from a different powder or to whatever, like if it's that fussy, I have no interest in it. It needs to be unfussy. Like I said in an earlier video, we are looking for forgiveness. We're looking for a combination that shoots no matter what. So I don't want some fussy, like, oh, the barrel has to be squeaky clean and only this powder can have gone down the barrel in order for it to shoot well. So then what we do is, like I said, we just snake down, snake up until all the shots are fired. And we'll show an example here. This is from the 7mm Showdown series. I believe this was the 7 PRC. So this is what it's going to look like when you're done. In that series, I only tested 3 powders, not 5. Obviously, if you use my method to find the powders, and let's say you're testing 3 to 5 powders all from the same color category, that's going to give you the best chance to find one that's that shoots better than the rest, one or more. For this series, to reduce the amount of components we were using, I decided to do 3, and I thought 3 would give me enough of a chance for there to be a standout so that I could use it as a teaching point. So here's what it's going to look like when you're done. And there's a couple of different things that we're looking for. Just at first glance, you have to spend virtually 0 seconds looking at this to determine that powder C is the best one. So because we're shooting 10 or 15 different charge weights all at the same place, we're not necessarily looking for, this charge weight is this group size. What we're trying to find is the least fussy powder and bullet combination. We're trying to find, based on what you picked, what is going to shoot in general, kind of no matter how much powder's in there. And oh God, I just realized something I need to say. I don't know if I'm going to say it now or not. Yeah, let's say it. Brace for impact. Point of impact location consistency. So average point of impact location relative to where you're aiming. The bullets, you're aiming wherever, the bullets hitting in the same place on average every time you go out and shoot is more important than the group size. Why is that? Well, because loads shift around. And I'm going to teach you how to find something that doesn't shift around. But the fact that the load hits in the same place every time is way more important than what size groups it's shooting. Obviously, we want it to shoot reasonably small, but a load that shoots tiny, but it shifts around a lot, is useless compared to a load that shoots maybe twice the size, but never moves. So This test is a way for you to find that, to find a powder that, in conjunction with your bullet and brass and whatever you picked, is going to have a consistent point of impact location. So if we look at these groups, no matter how we slice this, we say, okay, this powder A had 3 shots down here. The first shot's 1, 2, and 3. That's a nice little combination that might be worth exploring more. But then it came up to the center and it spit this one outlier. Well, even if we say, okay, just looking at first glance, C is obviously the best powder. What if we remove the worst shot from each one? Let's say we remove shot 9 from here. Shot, what would we remove? 7 or 3? One of the two. And we remove shot 1 from here. Well, if you remove one, the worst shot from each of these, now C is way better. Now it's even more of a standout than it was before you subtracted anything. Same thing, let's remove the worst 2 shots. So we remove shot 9 and shot 2? I don't know, from powder A. Powder B, we remove 7 and 3. Now that group is about like this. We'll look at powder C, we remove shots 1 and 6. Now the rest of that, the rest of those shots is like 5/8 of an inch. Maybe. So this is, in my experience, this is the easiest way for you to dabble a little bit with a bunch of different powders and only commit 10 to 15 shots with a given powder to be able to rule it out and pick winners and losers. Now, what I should say is also in this test, what you're going to find is where sequential shots hit in the same place. So if we look at powder A, shots 6, 7, and 8, so charge weights 6, 7, and 8 all hit in the same place. You can still find a good load in there somewhere. But in my experience, it's going to be less work and less screwing around if you don't pursue that and you just focus on the powder that shot the smallest aggregate across, however many grains of powder you tested. So you can still get good information. It's still worth retaining this information for these other powders in case for whatever reason, let's say powder C dries up and you can't find it anymore. You can still go back and go, okay, what about powder B? Where was that looking like it wanted to hit in the same, have the same point of impact location? Where did powder A look like it wanted to shoot? You can go back and dabble with it. But in general, this is what you're going to see, is that usually there'll be a standout that makes it blatantly obvious what powder you should be using. And then once you have that powder, then you go, okay, powder C is the winner. Now we go back into Gordon's and we go, all right, now that we know powder C is the winner, you pull up and input powder C. Make sure, because you have more data now, you have 10 to 15 shots worth of data. If you need to go in here and mess with either initial pressure or however you like to true it, make sure your temperature for the day is correct and mess with whatever your truing function is to go, all right, here were my predicted velocities, here was my actual velocity. So you can get that trued and go, all right, now I know this is a viable ladder. I got all the way up to my 15th shot or whatever, and I didn't see any pressure signs. I didn't see any reason to stop. I was able to shoot the whole ladder, went across this amount of velocity, and everything was good to go. And I found a couple spots in there that had, the same point of impact location across a few shots. That's likely where I'm going to see something good. But now I'm going to test it more thoroughly. So the 10 to 15 shot test is a way for you to find the best powder to use, but then you want to drill down and go, okay, now that I picked my powder, I want to test it more thoroughly. So then I suggest loading up, 3 to 5 shots of each. The same charge weights that you shot the first time. Load up 3 to 5 of each, and then you're going to go out and test again. But this time, each charge weight gets its own point of aim. And that's what we'll go into in the next video. So for this, I just wanted to, basically show you guys how to dabble a little bit with each powder and find a clear standout, so that way you're not getting over invested in any one particular powder. And if you guys do that 10 to 15 shot test with 3 to 5 different powders and it's your first time doing it, you're going to see what I'm talking about, where one of them is just going to shoot so much better than the others, and you go, okay, well, I was thinking about spending a lot of time on, powder A or powder B or whatever, and it'll be really eye-opening for you guys to see that it might have been an exercise in stupidity. You might have just been chasing your tail, trying to force a powder to shoot that, wasn't the best choice. So, and this way, if you're only shooting 10 to 15 shots with each powder, you're probably not using more than like a 20th or a 30th of that pound of powder, and then you'll still have it to test. Like I said, you'll have it to test with other cartridges. You're going to chew through most of a box of bullets. If you test 3 to 5 powders, you're going to chew through up to 75 bullets. But to me, that's a small investment to find the right powder, and the powder that's going to be the least fussy for you and put you in the best position to find a final load that's going to shoot across a wide range of conditions and not be fussy and not disappear on you. So I think that's it. I think that's it for now. And then on the next video, we'll go into I'll show you the ladder test that I shot, the more involved one where we're shooting 3 shots of each charge weight at their own point of impact, and how we do that and what we look for. So I think that's it, guys. Like, subscribe, share with your buddies, all that good stuff. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on the next one.